welcome to the Copilot Studio Dudecast, where we go through things that are going on with Copilot Studio and conversational AI, and in every episode I try to bring you the best people from the conversational AI space. So let's go explore together what's going on in conversational AI. This episode is sponsored by the AI and Copilot Summit running March 17th through the 19th at Torrey Pines Hilton in San Diego, where 750 plus business and technology leaders will join folks like myself and Donna Sarkar and others from Microsoft, along with dozens of speakers from the community to explore the potential of AI on business outcomes. Register today at copilotsummitna.com. And thanks to them for sponsoring videos like this to make it possible to bring you guys great content. Welcome everyone to the Copilot Studio Dudecast. Today I am joined by probably one of the most people that I'm most excited to actually get to talk to. I think it took me like 6 reschedules to get him here, but hey, everybody, welcome Gary Pretty to the actual Copilot Studio Dudecast. Gary, welcome to come in and talking to all the people that I have that are crazy enough to follow me around. But Gary, maybe do a quick introduction of yourself and just explain kind of where you work inside of Copilot Studio.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great to be here, and I'm glad we were able to finally make this work. And I appreciate all of the reschedules. My name is Gary Pretty. I'm a principal product manager on the Copilot Studio team, yeah, very excited to be here to talk about all things Copilot Studio and agents.
Excellent. Gary, I think that the people need to know, you and I go back way, way back. And I think if most people don't know that Gary and I actually go all the way back to Bot Framework, and Gary was there were 3 PMs back inside of, it wasn't even Copilot Studio, right? It was the Azure Bot Framework org. And so Gary came in as a developer. I was over in the program manager function, and we ended up collaborating and working on where I own the creation experience of the Azure Bot Framework Composer. And Gary, I think you own the editing interface for it, or the creation interface. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So as you said, I started about 7 years ago. It's been a long time we've been working with each other now. I came into Microsoft. I was an MVP for a few years beforehand with Bot Framework, and I joined as an engineer and did that for about 12 months. But a lot of my work was product management focused, working with MVPs, working with customers. And so it was a natural move for me to move over to the product management space and join great people like you. And my primary focus back then was on the authoring experience inside of Bot Framework Composer. So I guess what a lot of people would know as something similar to the topics experience that we have in Copilot Studio today, but in a desktop application.
Right. And a lot of this goes back to, and if you guys have listened to some of the podcasts in the past, you've heard me talk about how we were working on like waterfall dialogues, and then we had to come up with a way to be able to make a visual designer that would allow us to be able to build agents and I wouldn't even call it agents back then, Gary. I'd call it just simple bots. And it was really this whole incubation of context switching happening, which we called adaptive dialogues, that made it where we had to generate the code versus having to write the code inside of Visual Studio within the SDK. So this is kind of where the incubation of this visual design interface, and then we were still a PaaS-based service. We had to deploy like 14 services and everything inside of Azure just to be able to get a hello world going inside of the bot framework. And then Gary and I kind of got pulled in as part of a merger with this Power Virtual Agents thing. And then once that kind of got going, we ended up just saying, well, we need the power of the flexibility of the Azure Bot Framework Composer, but we wanted it in a SaaS that we called Power Virtual Agents at the time. And I know you and I worked on that whole, how do we get to basically the new version of the Power Virtual Agents, where we were taking all that, basically taking those concepts of the flexibility of Power Virtual Agent of the Bot Framework Composer into what at that time was Power Virtual Agents. And I know, Gary, it goes back, I tell people this story all the time, is that there's that day where you and I are working on all of the different specs and everything that we had to go build for the Power Virtual Agent side. And then we wake up this day and somebody says, take everything you're doing, throw it in the trash, because there's this generative AI thing that's taking over the world. And you got about I think it was about 3 months, and you need to ship it into the product. And I think that's where like generative answers came in and all and everything. So like I said, Gary and I have been on a very wild ride. Would you say that the wild ride is even close to being over yet, Gary?
I know, I mean, I think the one of my favorite stories to share about that time was right before the holidays. I think ChatGPT had been announced maybe about 4 weeks earlier at the end of November. And right before the holidays, like someone asked me, how long do you think it'll be before we're just, having topics generated for us from scratch? And I think my answer at the time was an incredibly naive one. And I said, oh, at least a couple of years away that. The technology looks good, but I'm sure there's loads of holes. Within a week of coming back after the holidays, I had a new mission, which was to ship, from a product perspective, ship our describe it to build it feature, which was one of the first natural language ChatGPT based features that we had in the product, to allow you to build dialogues from scratch. So, and from that day forward, things have just accelerated. And every single time I think they might, slow down or, peter out, it just continues to accelerate. I think within 2 months of having described it to build it and sort of natural language to dialogue built, we then came up with an idea. I was on a phone with a few of my colleagues and we're like, hey, some of these interesting technologies like semantic kernel are super interesting, almost a generative orchestrator. And then we sort of said, wouldn't it be awesome if we could, try and be the first or one of the first generative orchestrators in a low code product? And we put together a vision video and we socialized that. And I mean, I think it's fair to say within about 24 hours of us building a video that we said, hey, maybe we could show this at Build in a couple of months' time. We were given the mandate to go forth and build it, and you need to ship it in public preview in the next 6 weeks at Build. And I think it's fair to say I was both excited and terrified, because it was such a brand new technology. And yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah, and just to give you guys some perspective on these things Gary's talking about, is the feature that was supposed to be the first feature into Copilot Studio, and at that time it's still Power Virtual Agents, right, Gary? So it was
Yeah.
still Power Virtual Agents. There was this generative, it was basically, what do we call it? Generative answers, which was the basically fall back to a rag pattern type of implementation. And that was like the hero feature that was going on at the time. And then, so the one Gary's talking about, which is the describe it to build it, or you'll hear us refer to, even Copilot Studio's got a Copilot, right? That whole thing, I remember working with Gary and everybody was like, oh, well, that thing's going to take a bit. So we're going to work on this other thing. And all of a sudden, Gary ships this thing. He shows it to me. I think you called me excited one morning, and you get on the phone with me, and you're like, "Hey, look at this!" And I was like, "Oh my God, Gary, what are you going to do?" And he's like, "I think we're going to ship it." And so I think he was actually amazed that that even worked. And then he decided he was going to go dabble in this new orchestrator thing and all. We get the rebrand, right? We get the rebrand to Copilot Studio, which was that's a story within itself. And then you have this orchestration function where Gary comes back, and I remember you were trying to describe this to me, Gary, and I literally made my head hurt that morning. You're a good source of Tylenol ingestion for me because of the fact that usually when Gary calls me and tells me, "Hey, you got to check this out," it's not that it's not cool. It's just going to make my head hurt. So, so just know that he gives me this ring. We're like, okay, we're going to go into this thing that eventually became the basically the generative orchestration engine and the planner and all of those type of capabilities that had to go in. Now, Gary, when this shipped and kind of the thing that's out and what we're doing with this, maybe kind of give a differential between kind of what it does today and kind of what you anticipate kind of being a little different, because with the evolution of everything coming out from model improvements, because when we started with this, I think it was GPT 3.3 that is the when
3.5,
you
yeah.
yeah, and then it moved. I think in your first version it was even 3, and then we had to go to 3.5 for performance or something like this, and then and everything. But there's been huge number of model changes, and now there's like a selection where you could choose to use Opus, right, as your orchestration engine and everything. And so with all those changes and the way that things work, I feel like there's probably a lot that's going to be happening, or you can kind of envision how these model improvements and everything, because there wasn't even this thing called a reasoning model back in the day. And now, like even in 5, it's just embedded, like it's part of the 5 spec. So, what is the impact of all of this in general, and kind of where are we today, and how do you see that kind of changing as you move forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super interesting topic. And like I said, I think this feeds into that whole, this just continues to accelerate. And I think what became very clear very quickly for us is we're not going to be in a position to build a single generative orchestrator that then sits there and we effectively enhance it and maintain it. When we first built out the generative orchestrator, what we originally called generative actions, it was based with GPT 3.5 and was capable of calling tools, wasn't great at necessarily chaining tools together. We had to put a whole lot of code around it to make sure that if it would select a tool, it wasn't very good at filling in the information in those tools. And that's why we ended up with something called our slot filling code, which effectively says you just pick the code, you just pick the tool, and then we will handle with a separate set of prompts the ability to generate the conversation to prompt the end user for input. And that was a bit of a game changer for us because it meant that we could do full end-to-end tool chaining, collecting all the information from users, and still give some flexibility to our customers around this slot filling. We then had the challenge really of how do we improve performance because our latency was incredibly high early in the preview. You could be talking, upwards of 30 seconds for a response. And this was not a reasoning model. These were your basic chat models that we were using function calling.
Gary, you remember you shipped a version of this for about, I'm going to say for about 3 days, of GPT-4, and then you were like, nope. And they were just
Yeah,
like,
exactly. I mean, we have been learning along with the rest of the industry. It's just that we've been trying to lead where we can. And so we went from 3.5 to 4 to try and improve performance, and we got much better results, but the latency was horrible. So then we rolled back, and then we iterated again, and then we went back to 4. And in the end, what we decided to do was, you know what, we're just going to throw most of this away and we're going to rebuild it. And we came up with effectively the second iteration of the orchestrator, which is now what we're on, which is our sort of 4.1 default implementation. But as you say, we've started to add all these newer, much more capable models. And so where this is really going at the moment is we are constantly evaluating what are the things that we put around our code back in the day when we first designed this, where we were plugging holes the models couldn't handle, things like slot filling. And actually, now are they more of a problem for us? versus the benefit that we would get if we just gave that control over to the model in a safe and a consistent and a reliable way. And being very transparent, most of the controls that we've got there today are because what we want to deliver for customers is a way of getting reliable and consistent experiences so that the same thing happens each time. We're never going to be fully deterministic, right? It's not like a topic where you can say this thing is executing in exactly the same way every single time, but we need to get to the point where it's not completely unpredictable. And that's where we got to with our current architecture. But we're really examining how do we get out of the way of the model where we can to allow it to really shine. And when you choose different models, you should be able to opt into the different behaviors that those models have while still having the safety and the guardrails. A good example of this is with child agents that we introduced. And child agents are, very they can almost, during their development, we called them generative topics because from a use case perspective, they are often used for very similar things, right? I could go and build a topic that does lost or stolen credit card, where I've got to ask the user which credit card did you lose? Are there any suspicious transactions? I'm going to freeze your card by calling a connector. But there's a lot of conditionality in there. It takes me a while to build. Whereas now with a child agent, I can just describe that in 6 lines of instructions and I can be testing it within 5 minutes. One of the key capabilities that we took advantage of there is we gave those child agents the ability to respond directly and ask questions directly based on the model's preference. So if the model thinks, hey, I need to ask for more information, that wasn't something that they were good at 2 years ago. And now they are so much better. And so you get more flexibility with those child agents. So I think over time, what we're going to see is more and more of that flexibility, more and more of the ability to really take advantage of these models, rapidly coming to the main orchestration system as well.
Yeah. So with child agents, Gary, this is one of the things that I've been trying to start promoting more, even in my video content that I'm doing for training and stuff, is trying to get people to understand that if you look at what you can do in a child agent, you really get into a situation where you could say, I was working on, I'll give you an example here. I was working on something the other day, and I was working on trying to pull in like a procurement catalog and being able to say, look at this procurement catalog in, information, and then I need to be able to add something to a purchase request, but I want to be able to do it where I say, what's the quantity of the number of items in the purchase request? And I also need to go in and ask to verify the order before I actually submit the purchase request through the purchase request system. And so the interesting thing is that I kind of challenged myself at the time to do this completely without having to use a topic or as inputs or anything like this. I wanted to give the model the ability to be able to have the instructions that understood how to do this, and it actually works pretty darn well because it made it where it could go figure this out, and it could say, oh, okay, so you wanted to order latitude 14 or something, whatever type of computer. How many of those do you want? Is there anything else that you want to be able to do? And so you could have like this natural conversation that wasn't as strict as a topic, but you still, and then you wired it in with the tools and the knowledge that was associated to it. And you could even use the slashes to be able to give it some specifics where, and what I mean by slashes, guys, is if you put like a slash in instructions, you can say, you can call out a tool specifically and such. And so with that, the entire solution that I built around this procurement solution was completely built on child agents. And it also had 0 topics, Gary, not a single topic in it, which starts to bode the question, what is the future of a topic if child agents is that powerful, right? And where does it play and things? Now, I have my opinions, but I'd love to get your opinion on that.
It's a great question. It's one I get asked about quite a lot, and it's one that actually I think about, and we as a product team definitely are considering more and more. Um, Look, topics still very much have their place today. There are obviously use cases where it is incredibly important to have that very, very deterministic insurance that it is going to behave in a given way. But I think that the AI technology is rapidly catching up with the ability to actually do that as well. We're seeing that with child agents, the fact that I can write a set of instructions and have them followed in a way that feels deterministic, right? I can run it over and over and over again, and it just works. And I think a lot of the time, topics are used today almost as a default by some customers because they don't necessarily trust that the instructions will be followed because the experience that they had was 12, 18 months ago on the early versions of this tech. So I would definitely encourage people to be exploring technology like child agents, combined with the ability to switch your model at your agent level. When you switch the model, your child agents also take on that same model. And so you actually then get the benefits of being able to tune your instructions to that given model, etc. And so I think over time, topics will be needed less and less. Do I think that they will disappear completely? I personally don't. But then again, I didn't see, where we were going to be in 2 years' time, 2 years ago. So who knows where we will be? But certainly, I think that there is a huge opportunity to both make yourself more efficient when you're building out the agent using things like child agents, because you can build out these flows so much quicker. You can make them much more flexible, and that really impacts on the end user experience as well. The lost or credit card example is a great one where if I was building a topic and I pulled the latest 5 transactions for a user and I said, hey, can you tell me if any of these are, look suspicious, right? Is there a problem? Has somebody else made these transactions on your behalf? Today, it would be quite hard for me to come up with a way that doesn't feel rigid for a user to tell me what they are. I might say, enter the numbers of the ones that you think are suspicious. And we could do some natural language matching where the user says 1 and 3. Or I could maybe do an adaptive card, for example. But again, I need to do a lot of work to generate that card and send that card and have the user respond. With a child agent, because it's driven by an LLM, and the LLM is monitoring the input and generating the output, it can say which of these transactions are suspicious. And I can say none of them. I can say the first one, the middle one, the last one, the one on the 20th. I can say I didn't make the ATM withdrawals. And it's going to evaluate the content based on what I've said and completely understand me in context. So I think the thing that a lot of people miss with child agents is it's not necessarily just a different way to build the same thing, but it dramatically impacts the end user experience as well.
Yeah. Well, not only that, there's other pieces with child agents that see. The weird part is, Gary, everybody, like when we start talking about agents and multi-agent and everything, everyone seems to be super focused on connected agents, right? But me, I actually am way more excited about the concept of child agents and the power of a child agent because of the fact that if you start thinking about it just in general, let's just talk about descriptions and instructions and orchestration in general, right? So when we look at this, because of the fact that you have the ability to wrap tools, wrap knowledge into logical containers, then give instructions and descriptions on how, in the descriptions, you're going to be able to explain how you should use some of these different things. In the instructions, you can also give more guidance on how to apply them and just in general use of how you're using this thing. But the other part is because that is how that's working and there is a description for the actual child agent as well, what you end up with is a lot of people, and Gary, I know you and I've talked about this quite a bit, which is when you're trying to figure out which thing to use in the parent location. Once you get above about 40 different things to choose from, it starts to be a point where it can get a little confused. So when you start thinking about these logical containers that you can build, where you don't have to say, because I tell people, I see this all the time. People just dump a whole bunch of stuff into knowledge and act like that's the way to do it. But it's not really. Like if you built it in child agents and just grouped your knowledge into logical containers with instructions and descriptions over it, you actually can control it a bit. And I'll give an example of this, Gary. So, like, one of the things that I like to demonstrate to people is you can take Microsoft.com and put it inside of a child agent as knowledge. You can then give the description and instructions to say, this is only supposed to answer questions about Surface related products at Microsoft. And that's all it should talk about. And the weird part is a lot of people don't quite get that. They think it's like filtering, but it's not even filtering in a sense. It's that it won't even orchestrate to that child agent to answer questions unless the question you asked was around Surface. So in a way, it can help you with filtering it down, focusing it, and helping you make your orchestration happen in a more correct way, as well as how many people do you see doing this, Gary, where they go into the overview instructions on the parent agent and they dump a wall of text inside of that is explaining how to manage one tool's worth of information or this one capability versus putting it in a child agent so it doesn't have to run on the orchestration every single turn. And so it's stuff like this that are like there's just like tuning and stuff that people need to understand, that you can really optimize it by using this child agent capability. And to your point with topics, I think you and I are spot on here, Gary. I think people will still need topics. I think there's parts where you don't want to release control quite yet. I don't think the world is acceptant that when you want to report your credit card is stolen or something, that there might be a legal reason I need to do this 100% of the time. So I just see that we're probably going to still see that, but I think it becomes less and less over time. And I also feel like these other aspects I was talking about, people really need to understand the power of this thing, and make sure that they really go focus in and learn about descriptions and instructions, and also stop putting a wall of text in your descriptions, guys, like it or in your instructions.
Yeah,
Test
I
it,
mean,
let the model do it, and then nudge it.
yeah, completely. And look, again, just as we've been learning with the industry, so is everybody else. And I think that it's been very common to see a wall of instructions, dropped into the root of the agent. And I think that child agents can definitely help. I think also you alluded to connected agents there in our multi-agent architecture. And actually, these are all complementary capabilities. As you said, as your agent starts to scale out and agents get more complicated, we are definitely seeing an area like between 20 and 40 tools. It can start to degrade in its ability to accurately orchestrate between tools. And so that's when you want to start thinking about, when do I hand off or split out or scale out either into connected agents or into individual child agents? And in many cases, it's both. It will actually be determined, and we've got some guidance in our documentation about this as well on the multi-agent page for Copilot Studio. But it's things like, are there different teams building different agents? Or do you have one agent? Like, let's say I've got my banking agent on my banking website homepage, and I've got a credit cards agent that's being built by a separate team. Well, that needs to be a separate agent, and it also needs to be made available through the credit cards app independently. So there's really good reasons for having split out across connected agents. There's really good reasons if you're a single team or a single developer to be using child agents. And you can combine these as well. So I can have my parent agent reach out to the connected credit cards agent, which then has a child agent within itself to handle specific use cases. The important thing to consider is obviously things, the sort of trade-offs and limitations that are there today. Multi-agent shouldn't be used just for the sake of it. You should always be considering, the default should always be, if I can keep this in a single agent, and it's performant and it's accurate and it works well, do that. I wouldn't encourage anybody to go and use multi-agent features, even if I had a hand in building them, just for the sake of it, because you always are going to incur, a minor amount of additional latency when you split out into a multi-agent system. There are limitations that we've put in place that today they have to be in the same environment. So there are definitely things to consider as you're building out these systems, but they are incredibly powerful tools as well. Um, and what you're going to see over time is we're going to be expanding those capabilities. So we're already GA with our child and connected agent capabilities in Copilot Studio. Over the coming months, you're going to see us take the things that are in public preview right now, like A2A protocol integration, Foundry integration, SDK agents, and Fabric. And we'll be working to bring all of those to a GA milestone as well. Because we are seeing huge adoption because these agents are scaling out very quickly. To your point, we actually do see the numbers back up the theory that actually child agents are being used more for individual use cases and connected agents are being used for when you want to scale out an agent, because we do see more child agents being created than connected agents. But that's because most of the time they are being used as almost a one-to-many. I've got my parent agent with child agents. I've also got connected agents, and each of them have their own child agents as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, so I'm actively rebuilding the boot camp series, the architecture boot camp series for the CAT organization. And by the way, guys, if you didn't know this, just you can go search for this, and you can go sign up. And what we do is we go in, we do hands-on lab training for free for customers and for and others. Matter of fact, I think we've got one coming up February 24th in Redmond. So there's open seats. So if you guys want to come out, and I'll be there. And one of the things is that we are launching the brand new version of the architecture boot camp on February 24th. One of the things is the multi-agent lab that we built for that. One of the major things I did on that one, Gary, is I actually did that. I made sure that what I gave the people to use is a connected agent with child agents inside of it that they will connect together so that they can see, not only do they create child agents and learn how to do that, and also be able to go into advanced settings and be able to dynamically choose when a child agent is even relevant based upon a variable, right? Then you get into, okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to a different agent and orchestrate to it and let it have its own set of child agents so that it can turn around and answer questions for people. And so what you really get into is, as you start building this all out, you really get into a lot of interesting conversation. Like what I see a lot of people doing, which is this is not a good use of connected agents, is trying to do it because of departmental separation, not because of application scalability or functional separation, but literally saying this department is building this and this department's doing that, and treating connected agents as microservices. Now, that's really not a good pattern to be able to do. That's why component collections exist, is so that you can get departmental separation and all of that. So it's not a reason to actually do this. This is probably the most common pattern that is kind of being abused when we look at connected agents. But to your point, I really like the way you kind of do it, where you're talking about how we can use it as a scale pattern. I also think it's a good situation where, let's say you had an employee assistant and you had an IT assistant function, and not all people who use the IT assistant, we have contractors, we have maybe you have um, external employee or external people, external vendors that are going to access the IT agent to be able to get IT support, but they don't necessarily need the employee support stuff for like HR scenarios and stuff. It's very common that you might break it out that way because you want a standalone endpoint for just the IT agent because it can stand on its own. And then you have the employee assistant, which incorporates the IT agent so that people don't have to go oh, I want to talk to 16 different agents. So in my mind, these are better cases, and I think that's a part where a lot of learnings and trial and error and a lot of stuff like with CAT that we work in, which is the Copilot acceleration team, part of engineering. I feel like this is the part that people are kind of learning over time, and it's kind of like learning by making the mistake. But there is one thing I did want you to kind of talk about a little bit, Gary, and that is there is something when you're talking with an agent, and this goes all the way back to bots, right? If we go all the way back to bot framework to the beginning where we started, there was this whole concept that I don't think people fully get 100% who maybe just started to dabble, which is there's really still this conversation state that you have to maintain between inside of your agent. And so there's this, and a lot of that, people think what I'm talking about is memory, but what we're really talking about is the set of variables, the global variables, the conversational context, and all of that. And as we start thinking about multi-agent and connected agent, I know that there's a need for us to be able to start thinking about this and saying, hey, how can I make it where, let's say I load a user profile in my parent agent, and it's got an entire list of context within it about this that's not spoken, right? It's not the conversational context. That kind of thing, where do you kind of see that going in the future with multi-agent and connected agent? Because it's going to become very important in order to be able to allow that employee assistant to pass that information into that IT assistant scenario that we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a number of mechanisms that we can use, and honestly, some of it depends on the particular protocol that we're using or the type of agents that we're connecting to. Within Copilot Studio, one of the methods that we've actually got today, probably one of the best kept secrets of Copilot Studio, is that when you create a global variable, you can set that to what we call user state, or can be carried across sessions. It's just if you select the variable within a topic and tick the button to carry across sessions, that's then persisted for that user on that channel. And rather than being tied to just that specific agent, that then means if you're using that variable, you can you could have that variable within a connected agent, for example, and then each time that connected agent gets invoked from the parent, that variable will still be hydrated because it's a user state rather than a sort of more of a session state or a conversation state. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'd encourage you to do is think about, especially when it comes to Copilot Studio Agent, environment variables, because those environment variables you can potentially carry across those agents as well, and they can be written too if they're configured correctly. So that's definitely another thing. But we've definitely got one eye on how can you have more control over the context that you're passing between the agents. So by default today, as with many of the protocols like the A2A protocol, our agent will send a natural language task to the connected agent. You can optionally send the conversation history as well, so it's got more context to work with. And then when it's finished executing, it sends back a natural language summary of what it did. But we know that sometimes that's not enough. And so we've actually been working in the background to build it's something that's actually already available for child agents today, but it will be available for connected agents in the near future, which is the ability for you to manage an input and output schema for those agents very intentionally. So you can say, look, as well as the natural language task that I send, I know I always need to send these three pieces of information. Maybe it's a user profile, a user ID, product ID, whatever. You can even say, forget the natural language task. I just want to share this one piece of information. My agent is built to handle one very specific thing. And I want to send this one or more variables in, and I want to get one or more variables out. And so we're going to introduce that capability into the studio pretty soon. Exact dates to be announced, but it is coming, and it's something that we're very aware of people wanting. So yeah, we're pretty excited about that.
So Gary, this is another thing I want to kind of talk about. I know it wasn't officially on our agenda to talk about, but I think it's really important for people to understand, and you are the person who introduced this concept to me. So I think it's important for people to kind of get it from the master himself. And that is this inputs and outputs function. A lot of people don't understand the concept of this, and I think this is a place where even if we go all the way to topics, right? Topics can have inputs and outputs, and so can tools, and so can child agents, and now we're talking connected agents having this. So if you kind of go into inputs and outputs, maybe explain it really quick in your own words of how what is an input and what is an output in comparison to, like, even if you go into a topic where you say there's a question node, right, which collects data into a variable, how is it different than that and in your mind, and how do you think this actually, to me, is probably one of the most transformative things? And I did a dedicated video on my channel, and in the I did people asked me to go build like playlists that said where to get started, and I made darn sure that that video was in the getting started playlist because of the fact that it's so influential, this concept, but I don't necessarily believe that we really ever touted it really heavy. And so I feel like if the master himself, the man who really like taught me about this, it'd be great if you kind of turned around and gave the world kind of what's your view of that and how that works.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is if you've used any LLMs that can call any tools, those tools can have inputs. And what we mean is they're just slots. They're values that we're passing into that tool before it executes. And then it can send back one or more outputs. So you can have one or more output slots. So this is something very familiar to anybody who's used a Power Platform connector. For example, a connector action can have one or more inputs and one or more outputs. We've just taken that concept and applied it to our topics. We're applying it, like I said, to our connected agents. It's already applied to our child agents. And the reason they are so powerful is because these slots are visible to the orchestrator, to the large language model planner. And they each have a name and they have a description associated with them. And so, sure, I can create a topic. I can have a question node inside of that topic based on the type of that question node. Sometimes we can pre-fill a value based on what you've said with our, classic slot filling capabilities, but it's nowhere near as powerful. Now I can say I've got a topic that is going to be handling callback requests, right? Setting up callback requests or ticket. Let's do ticket generation, right? So for opening a ticket, I need to know what's the problem. So what's the title of the ticket? What's the description? What's the severity? Which team am I raising this for? Which particular product am I raising this for? And so I could absolutely ask all of those things inside of a topic and collect that information from the user. But now, if it's a topic or it's an agent or it's another tool, I simply provide inputs for each one of those things and an appropriate description. And what that allows our orchestrator to do is when it determines, hey, the user wants to open a ticket, I'm going to go and call that tool. I can see that tool has these 5 inputs. The first one is asking for a title. Well, I can see that the user has just told me that their PC is broken. The next one is a description. I can also see that they've said that when they turn it on, they get a BIOS error. So now the LLM can actually generate from context a description. There may be a which team or what's my name. Well, it can go and get that from context as well because it knows who I am as the logged in user. It may already have my user profile, so it doesn't need to ask me for all this information. It can just slot fill it intelligently. The same thing can apply with outputs. So let's say I execute a tool that goes and fetches a bunch of information from Dataverse or any other data store. I might fetch that data in quite an unstructured way, but the output that I've defined on that tool might be a very explicit, this is a Power FX record, it has this schema, and I can give an appropriate description. And actually what the LLM can then do is take that unstructured data and without me doing anything, where I would have previously needed to run a bunch of PowerFX functions and had to do a bunch of work, the LLMs have actually gotten incredibly good at taking that unstructured data and generating the output. My favorite example for this is I have a neat topic that I've built, which is effectively an adaptive card generation tool. So I can add this topic, I give it the description, you can use this card, you can use this topic to send cards to the user. And it has an input, which is called JSON. And it's the description is this is the JSON for the adaptive card to be displayed. And I can even have an output, which is the user's response if the adaptive card is interactive and it's collecting some information. Once I make that tool available to my orchestrator, I can then give instructions like go and check the status of flight VS73, and then show the results to the user on a card. And the orchestrator then goes, okay, well, to show the card, I need to go and use that tool that Gary's provided for me. And I see the input is a JSON. Well, I've already just got the flight status from another connector or a web search. Okay, great. I can now just generate the JSON because the LLM has a very good understanding of the adaptive card schema. So that's a really neat example, and I'll definitely send you that example if you've not used it before, and maybe you can share it as well.
Yeah, that actually probably be a good new video. You guys let me know in the comments if you would like to have a video on how to generate adaptive cards with an LLM. So for responses, because that's a great scenario, Gary, actually. And I think the other thing that I really like using them for is if I had a thing where I built a demo. I think I even do it in one of the videos where what I do is I go in and I'm collecting information on being able to submit I think a PO is what I did, a purchase order. And then what I do is I say I need to get it for this vendor, and you got to collect like 5 or 6 different things. And because I made them all as inputs on a tool, then what I'm able to do is I can actually go backwards. And so it's asking me, hey, what are the terms for this PO? Is it, 30, 60, 90 days? And I actually go back and say, make it 120 days, but actually change the the shipping vendor to DHL from FedEx, right? And it'll go backwards in the way. So if you're building it with inputs versus questions, right? A lot of people will build like a topic with questions, but even if you're building a topic and you just change it to say, I never use a question node anymore, I'm just going to use inputs on my topics, you're still in control of the conversation. It's just going to generate that question's text if it's not filled in, but you're going to get the benefit of being able to go backwards in it versus a structured conversation that's going to have to follow this more organized path. And once it gets a slot filled, it's not going to go back and do this. So these are things that are just hugely beneficial with that. And so thanks a lot for the information on that. I think that was a really cool feature. And since this was one of your brainchild type of features, Gary, I have to ask the question as we kind of close out. What are the things that are coming up just in the industry, not necessarily just Copilot Studio, but what you're seeing that really has you excited? What is, the thing that makes you think really hard at nights these days about what's happening in this space? Maybe even what scares you, right, about what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean it's such an interesting question. It changes week by week. I think let me respond by telling you what I'm probably most excited and a little bit scared by, which is the emergence of AI-driven development. And I mean, I've been doing this for a while now. Obviously, I've got an engineering background, so over the last 6 months, I've been using awesome tools like GitHub Copilot. I vibe coded an educational application for my daughter to help with her spelling. I was able to do that in just a few hours, and it was an awesome application with speech integration and everything like that. So what it's actually doing for me and many of our colleagues internally is it's accelerating our workflow, and it's also allowing us to make our delivery more efficient. So I'll give you a great example. We had a bug reported in the orchestrator yesterday. Normally, I would raise that bug, it would go off to one of the engineering teams and they would pick it up. But we're obviously hard at work on building out new features and improving quality. And I knew that this bug was going to be in a specific part of the code. And so I've actually got, whilst we're talking, Claude Code working in the background. And I'm actually working up an initial prototype for that fix, which I can then hand to engineering and say, look, I've already diagnosed the problem. I know, approximately where it is. I think this fix looks good based on my understanding of the engine, and I can hand it to them. And what it means is we're going to turn around a fix for that much, much faster. I'm also utilizing, tools like Claude Code to help with our specification documents because they are so good at thinking around a problem in a way that I do as well, but it's like having just another co-worker opposite me who I can bounce ideas off. And I know it's everyone has had similar experiences, but certainly over the last few weeks, couple of months, the acceleration of adoption for within our day-to-day jobs has really just gone through the roof. And I don't see that slowing down, which is probably the bit that scares me the most. But for the most part, it's a very, very good thing.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Gary, if people come out to our um, to the actual training that I'm talking about, the boot camp, you're actually going to see that there is a feedback system that Gary and I went, just so you guys know, last week, Gary and I were in Redmond together, and he and I kind of got introduced just to how far um, these different tools have evolved, and in conjunction with using a combination of um, the Claude code and the Copilot for GitHub and all of this and building together, you're going to actually, I've actually been able to go in and build out the entire feedback application that we are going to use for collecting which training module is performing and not performing for our boot camp series. So, and Gary, you didn't know this, but one of the cool things that I know I'm Copilot Studio dude, yeah, absolutely, and we're going to keep talking about Copilot Studio on my channel. But the other thing is that I'm actually invited a guest as of yesterday, Gary, and I'm not going to divulge who that guest is today. You have to subscribe and be able to get this one. But I actually am going to have a guest come on who's been working in conjunction with me and has been kind of playing in that space and kind of introduce the concepts and talk about this new vibe coding thing, which I didn't even know what it was called, Gary. When I saw it, I just went, the thing that's freaking me out right now. However, that was something I discovered because everybody kept saying something. They kept calling this vibe coding. So if you guys are interested in that, you definitely should subscribe and start to the channel, and also be able to subscribe to the podcast, because we're going to talk about this in an episode yet to come. So know
Awesome.
that this is a key thing, because Gary, to your point, this is the thing that in the last week, and like you said, I feel like you and I both can agree, we get both excited and terrified about a different thing every week. This is this week's excitement and terrified
Yeah.
situation
I
for
mean, look,
us.
I wouldn't swap it. I wouldn't swap it for the world. I love this space. It's just hard to keep up and sometimes hard to get sleep, but you know what? It's worth it. It's totally worth it. I mean, we'll always be able to look back and say that we were here.
Absolutely. And I think the good news is, guys, is that while the initial response on that space is probably to be terrified, right, Gary? But then when you actually start getting into it, what you realize is that it's just making you more efficient. It just makes you
Yep.
amplified. And so that type of thing, I think I would encourage people to start exploring, continue to learn, and also, you know, go out and try to build, because the more you start doing this, the more you get into Copilot Studio and really start pushing it, the more you'll learn. You'll find the edges, you'll tune those edges, you'll see how you can do that. And meanwhile, any edge you find, Gary Pretty himself is going to probably be the guy who's back behind the scenes trying to write a feature specification to be able to make sure that that goes away. So, so Gary, thanks for joining me today. Is there any place that you would recommend, or you would want to tell people that they can maybe follow you, or just in general that you would recommend for people to go uh, take a look at?
I would say that I certainly don't get to post as much content myself as I used to. So I think my only recommendation is to continue watching this channel because I know that all the good things will end up on Dwayne's channel. So he's the go-to source for many of our team to keep up with things, and so that would be my recommendation. But folks should feel free to reach out to me as well on LinkedIn. And I'm at plenty of the conferences with Dwayne as well, so always good to meet people in person too.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've never seen a co-delivery, which Gary, it's been a minute since you and I have presented together,
Yeah,
but if you ever get the opportunity to witness the antics of the Gary Dwayne combo in a presentation, then you definitely should sign up for that. So Gary, you and I are going. I've got some events. There are some events coming up. I'm gonna trick you into coming to the North America Summit in Nashville, just because I want you to come to Nashville so you can come visit me, and I can go show you the town. But
let's do
if
it.
Yeah, otherwise I know the way to get Gary. The way to get Gary to come to your event is have it in Orlando, because
Yes.
Gary is a bit of a Disney freak in a sense, right? Isn't that Gary?
Well,
So
I think the picture behind me speaks for
the
itself,
pictures.
right?
It's so
So,
so again, Gary, thanks for coming. I know it took us a few tries to be able to get it down, but I'm super happy that we were able to do it, and keep doing all the great things that you're working on. And guys, make sure you follow him on LinkedIn, because when he does post, it's probably pretty darn important. So, but definitely make sure that you guys stay tuned and keep coming back, because I'm going to have more and more content. I've had a little bit of a lull, because Gary can tell you I'm literally rebuilding the entire boot camp series for Copilot Studio to reflect all the great new things that Gary and team have been doing. So there's a bit of a slowdown. This is an extra on top of my job type of thing. I don't know if you guys realize the lighting change in this video, but it's because Gary lives in the UK and the sun is rising over here, so it's kind of hard to control the lighting even in the room. But just know that again, please make sure that you guys stay tuned, and I'm looking forward to the additional guests that I've got. I've got lots of good things coming. So definitely come out and see us at one of the events. And Gary, thanks again for coming. And I appreciate everything you do and all the great work that the team does with you.
no problem. Thanks, Dwayne. Thanks for having me.